Marcus, can I ask you something kind of personal?
Sure. I'm an open book. What's on your mind?
You grew up in a tough neighborhood, right? Like, genuinely poor?
Rough part of Detroit, yeah. Why?
Because I've been doing this financial literacy workshop at the community center, and I keep running into this wall. I give people all the right advice: budget this, save that, open a Roth IRA, and they look at me like I'm speaking Mandarin. And I don't think it's because they don't understand the words. I think I'm missing something fundamental about what poverty actually does to a person. And I thought maybe you could help me understand it.
That's a big question. And honestly, most financial advisors are missing about 90% of the picture. They treat poverty like it's just a math problem. Like if someone can just figure out where their money's going, poof, problem solved.
And it's not?
It's so much more than that. Can I use an analogy that's going to sound completely unrelated at first?
Go for it.
Rocket science.
Okay.
When a rocket tries to leave the atmosphere, it has to fight gravity. It has to reach a very specific speed. They call it escape velocity. And here's the brutal part. If that rocket burns 99% of its fuel but doesn't hit that speed, it doesn't get 99% of the way to orbit. It falls back down and it crashes.
So getting close doesn't count.
Getting close doesn't count. That's exactly what happens to working class people every single time. They work hard, they save a little, they climb halfway up the wall, and then something happens. Car breaks down, medical bill shows up, the landlord raises rent, and gravity kicks in. They fall all the way back to the bottom. Actually, lower, because now they're discouraged. Now they're exhausted. Now they have less fuel than they started with.
That's actually a really visceral way to think about it. Because the people in my workshop, that's what I'm seeing. They try, something knocks them back, and each time it happens, they trust the process a little less.
And that's rational. That's not weakness. When falling back hurts you more every single time, your brain starts telling you, don't climb, it's not worth the fall.
So the first problem is that poverty is almost designed to make people stop trying.
It's not designed in the conspiratorial sense. It's more terrifying than a conspiracy. It's just mathematics. The system has structural features that punish people for being poor, and the punishment compounds. Let me walk you through the specific loops, because it's not one thing, it's 5 interlocking traps.
Okay, I'm listening. Start at the beginning.
The first one I call the scarcity tax, and it starts in the brain, not the bank account. There's a researcher at Harvard, Sendhil Mullainathan, and he did this fascinating, disturbing study published in the journal Science. He found that when your mind is consumed by financial stress, when you are genuinely worried about whether you can make rent, whether you can fix your car, whether you can feed your kids this week, your performance on cognitive tests drops significantly. Across fluid intelligence tests and executive control tasks, the effect was equivalent to roughly 13 IQ points worth of cognitive impairment.
That's a huge drop just from financial stress.
And Mullainathan used the sleep deprivation comparison himself. He said it was a similar magnitude to going a full night without sleep. Now, to be precise, this was measuring cognitive performance in the moment, not permanently restructuring your intelligence. It's not that poverty makes you less capable as a person. It's that the mental load of financial crisis consumes so much working memory and attention that you have less cognitive bandwidth available for everything else. And think about what that means practically. Poor people are being asked to make incredibly complex, high-stakes, long-term financial decisions with a brain that is already running at near full capacity, just managing the immediate crisis. A brain that has been redirected towards short-term survival.
That reframes so much, because when I see someone take a payday loan at a 300% interest rate, my instinct is, why would you do that? But if their brain is in crisis mode,
They're not being stupid. They need $200 by Friday, and the payday loan place is right there. Their brain literally cannot run the long-term calculation right now because it's too busy solving the immediate crisis. And here's what makes it a trap. The payday loan creates more financial stress next week, which consumes even more cognitive bandwidth, which makes the next long-term calculation even harder. It's a loop, a closed system.
So the poverty itself is creating the cognitive conditions that make escaping poverty harder?
Now you're getting it. And paired with that brain effect, there's what I call the Vimes-Boots theory. Have you heard of Sam Vimes?
The character from Terry Pratchett?
Yeah, the cop from the Discworld novels. Pratchett had him explain this idea once, and it's maybe the most economically accurate thing in fiction. So Vimes is thinking about boots. A rich man buys a quality pair of boots for $50. They last 10 years. His cost is $5 a year. A poor man can only afford $10, so he buys the cheap pair. The cheap pair falls apart in a year, so next year he buys another cheap pair for 10. Over 10 years, the poor man has spent $100 on boots. The rich man spent 50. The poor man spent twice as much money and his feet were wet the entire time.
That's infuriating.
It's the mathematics of being poor. Everything is more expensive when you're poor. You can't buy in bulk because you don't have the upfront cash, so you pay a higher unit price per item. You can't afford a good dentist, so you wait until the tooth becomes an abscess and then you pay for a root canal, which is 5 times as expensive and 100 times as painful. You can't afford a reliable car, so you drive a beater that breaks down constantly, and you pay more in repairs than you would have on a decent car payment.
And there are actual fees built in, too. Overdrive fees, late fees.
The financial system levies penalties specifically on people who don't have enough money. If you have plenty of money, your bank is basically free. If you're running close to zero, your bank is actively billing you. Overdraft fees, minimum balance fees, return check fees. The less you have, the more it costs you to exist in the financial system.
So how do you even begin to break that first loop?
It sounds almost embarrassingly simple, but it's not. The first goal, not investing, not buying a house, not retirement, just a buffer. $500, $1,000 if you can get there, in a separate account that you do not touch. Because here's what that buffer actually buys you. It's not stuff, it's cognitive bandwidth.
Say more about that.
When your car breaks down and you have $1,000 in savings, it's an inconvenience. You're annoyed, you call a mechanic, you handle it. When your car breaks down and you have nothing in savings, it is a catastrophe. It's a cascade. You miss work, you lose income, you can't pay rent, you take the payday loan, your brain goes into emergency mode, you make 3 more bad decisions. That buffer doesn't just pay for the car repair, it literally buys back your IQ. It lets you sleep. It lets you lift your eyes from the immediate crisis and look at the horizon.
I've never framed it that way to the people in my workshop. I always say, save for emergencies. But the actual selling point is you're buying your brain back?
You're buying your nervous system back. You're de-escalating your own stress hormones. And that changes every downstream decision. Now, getting to that buffer requires real sacrifice. It might mean a few months of living uncomfortably tight. But you're not doing it to be frugal for frugality's sake. You're doing it to drain the swamp, so you can build something on solid ground.
Okay, that's loop 1, the scarcity tax. What's loop 2?
Loop 2 is the one that gets people judged the most harshly, and it's the one where I have the most empathy. I call it the dopamine trap. And you've heard the criticism, right? Why do poor people have the newest iPhone? Why do they buy expensive sneakers? Why eat out when you could cook at home?
I'll be honest, I've had that thought. Not out loud, but privately.
Everyone has, and it's the wrong question. The right question is, what does chronic financial stress do to your brain chemistry? When you're first trapped in that poverty loop, your stress response activates, cortisol spikes, you're on high alert. But here's what's really insidious about long-term chronic stress. Over time, the body actually starts to down-regulate that stress response. The system gets worn out. Researchers call it cortisol blunting. Instead of staying elevated, your cortisol response flattens. Which sounds like relief, but it isn't. What it actually means is that your body's ability to respond to new stressors becomes blunted too. You feel emotionally flat, fatigued, disconnected. You're not calm, you're depleted. And then you walk into a store and you buy that new pair of shoes. And for about 20 minutes, the pain lifts. Your brain releases dopamine. You feel successful. You feel like you matter. You feel like a person with choices.
So it's not irresponsibility. It's self-medication.
That's exactly what it is. They're using consumption as an anesthetic. The experience of buying something, especially something visible, something that signals status, gives the brain the win it's been starved of. And the problem isn't that these people are dumb or weak. The problem is the relief is temporary and the debt is permanent.
The dopamine fades in 20 minutes.
But the credit card bill lasts 20 years, and that's where the trap closes, because now you have the debt, which creates more financial stress, which drains more of that cognitive bandwidth, which makes you more desperate for relief, which leads to more spending. It feeds itself.
What's the difference in mindset then, between someone who breaks this loop and someone who doesn't?
At its core, it's how you see money. Poor people, and I mean this without any judgment, I've been here, see money as a way to buy pleasure. When you get $500, the first thought is, what can I buy with this? Rich people see money as a way to buy freedom. When they get $500, the first thought is, how can I make this work for me?
Assets versus liabilities.
Robert Kiyosaki made that framework famous, but it's genuinely true. An asset puts money in your pocket. A liability takes money out. A designer bag is a liability. It loses value the second you walk out of the store. A share of stock is an asset. It works for you while you sleep. Most people in the low-income trap are surrounded by liabilities. They look prosperous, nice car, nice shoes, latest phone, but they are hemorrhaging wealth every single month.
Feeding the dopamine monster but starving their future.
That's exactly it. And I want to use your words back at you when I get to the end of this, because that's the clearest summary I've heard. But first, how do you break the dopamine loop?
This is going to sound harsh, but I call it monk mode. It's a temporary, deliberate reset of your brain's reward system. 6 months, ideally. You cut everything that isn't food, shelter, and basic transportation. Cancel the subscriptions, stop eating out, stop buying clothes, stop the impulse purchases. Drink water instead of soda. Take the bus instead of Uber.
People hate hearing that.
Because it sounds like deprivation, but the reframe matters enormously. You're not poor and forced to do without. You're in training. You're an athlete in the off-season who is reshaping their physiology for the championship. And what happens in monk mode, if you stick with it, is that your brain starts to rewire. It starts to find the dopamine in a different place. You start getting a hit from watching your savings account grow, from seeing the debt number go down, from knowing that you have a buffer and nobody can knock you off balance today.
That's a different kind of dopamine.
The dopamine of control. And it's more satisfying than anything you can buy in a store because it doesn't fade, it compounds. Once you realize you don't need the new phone to feel okay, you become genuinely dangerous to the system that's been farming your anxiety for profit.
The system meaning...
Advertising. The entire economy of consumer products. It's literally built on the premise that you will spend money to manage emotional pain. Every ad is designed to create a sense of inadequacy. You're not enough without this product. And then offer the product as relief. If you stop believing the inadequacy story, the whole mechanism stops working on you.
That's a kind of freedom I've never thought to talk about in a financial literacy context. Okay, loop 3.
Loop 3 is the one that keeps people physically tired. I call it the linear income trap. And it starts with the equation most of us are taught from childhood. Time equals money. You want more money, you work more hours. Second job, overtime, driving for a rideshare app on weekends.
Which is what everyone's first advice is. Get a second job.
And there's a fatal mathematical flaw in it. Time is finite. You have 24 hours, you have to sleep for 7 or 8 of them, you have to eat, you have to exist. Your income is therefore capped. There is a ceiling and no amount of effort breaks through it.
And meanwhile, expenses are not capped.
There's this silent killer that nobody talks about enough in these conversations: inflation. Inflation is essentially a tax that falls hardest on people who trade their time for money. When the money supply expands, prices go up. Bread costs more, gas costs more, rent costs more. But do wages go up in proportion?
Definitely not immediately.
Wages are what economists call sticky. Your employer waits a year, maybe 2, before giving you a 3% raise. But by then, inflation has already eaten 8 or 9% of your purchasing power. You are literally running up a down escalator. You work more hours, you miss your kid's soccer game, you damage your health, you push through exhaustion, and at the end of the year, you are measurably poorer than when you started. In real terms, after inflation.
So, working harder within a broken system just produces more of the same.
You cannot win a rigged game by playing by the rules. You have to change the game entirely. And the game change is this: stop selling time and start selling value.
How do you do that practically when you're starting from very little?
Skill stacking. And this is different from what most people are told. Most people are told to specialize, become the very best at one thing, be the best accountant, the best nurse, the best developer. That's genuinely hard, and those markets are crowded. The less obvious path is to be genuinely good at 2 or 3 unrelated skills and combine them in a way that makes you rare.
Give me an example.
Scott Adams, the guy who created Dilbert, has talked about this. He wasn't the best artist. He wasn't the funniest writer in the room. He wasn't the deepest business thinker. But he was solidly good at all 3. And when you stack those 3 things together, nobody else in the world sits at that exact intersection. He became exponential.
So, you're not competing in a crowded field, you're creating your own field.
Exactly. Think about a construction worker. If they only have construction skills, they are a commodity, replaceable, competing on price. But if they learn sales, now they're a contractor who can bid jobs and close clients. The market doesn't pay for their physical labor anymore, it pays for the rare combination of physical competence and sales ability. That's a different market entirely.
Or a server who learns copywriting.
Now they understand psychology of decision-making. They understand how to describe things compellingly, and they understand food from the inside. That's someone who can write menus that increase average ticket size, or do marketing for restaurants, or transition into hospitality consulting. They've escaped the hourly ceiling.
And the key is that the second skill is learned during the monk mode period, like use that freed up time and money to invest in the skill stack.
That's exactly the sequencing. You cut your spending, you build the buffer, you protect your cognitive bandwidth, and then you use the mental clarity that gives you to start building something new. The second skill doesn't have to cost much. Most of it can be done with library books, YouTube, free online courses. The investment is time and focus, not money.
This is starting to feel like a real sequence, like these loops have an order.
They do. You can't skill stack effectively if your brain is still in scarcity mode. You can't survive monk mode if you're still being drained by the dopamine trap. Each one has to be addressed in sequence. They're interlocking.
What's loop 4?
This is the hardest one to talk about because it gets personal. I call it social gravity. And there's a saying that I know sounds like a motivational poster, but it has real psychological grounding. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Psychologists have documented this for decades. We learn by observing and imitating the people around us. We absorb their habits, their language, their assumptions about what's normal and what's possible. Bandura called it social learning theory. It's one of the most replicated findings in behavioral science.
So it's not just inspiration poster wisdom. The mechanism is actually documented.
Thoroughly. And what that means practically is that if your 5 closest people have accepted their financial situation as permanent, if the shared story in your tribe is that the game is rigged and nothing you do will change it, you are absorbing that story whether you want to or not. Not because they're bad people, because that's how human learning works.
The crab bucket.
You know the crab bucket.
1 crab in a bucket climbs out. 10 crabs in a bucket, and the other 9 pull the climber back down.
And they don't do it out of malice. The one climbing makes the others feel the weight of their own captivity. When you start monk mode, when you start saving, when you start acquiring skills and talking differently about money, your old friends will notice, and they won't cheer for you.
What will they do?
They'll say you're working too hard. They'll say you think you're better than everyone. They'll say the game is rigged, so why bother? And here's what makes it devastating. They're not entirely wrong. The game is rigged in meaningful ways, but they're using that truth as a reason to stay still, and you need to use it as a reason to be strategic.
How do you navigate that without completely abandoning people you love?
That's the real tension, and I don't want to pretend there's a clean answer. You can love people without letting their narrative become yours. You can show up for family without marinating in a 3-hour conversation that is just
collective despair dressed up as bonding. The goal isn't to be cruel or to signal that you're better. The goal is to protect your mind. You have limited bandwidth, remember? Every hour you spend absorbing someone else's hopelessness is an hour you're not spending building.
So it's about where you direct your attention more than who you physically are around.
And this is where the internet completely changes the game, by the way. You don't have to find successful, ambitious people in your neighborhood. You can spend your time with them virtually. Read the biography of someone who built something from nothing. Watch their interviews. Listen to their thinking. When you read about how Marcus Aurelius managed the stress of leading an empire, or how Howard Schultz grew up in the housing projects of Brooklyn and built Starbucks, you are downloading a different operating system. You're choosing whose voice fills your head.
You're deliberately choosing your social learning environment.
Instead of letting your physical environment choose it for you. Most people absorb the mindset of whoever is physically closest. You can choose to absorb the mindset of the greatest thinkers in human history. Books are the cheapest access to extraordinary mentorship that has ever existed.
I want to come back to something you said earlier about social gravity being connected to a shared story of victimhood, because I think that's important and also really easy to misread.
Say more.
Because when you say poverty is sometimes a culture or a shared story, there's a version of that argument that becomes really ugly, that becomes poor people just have the wrong mindset and that's why they're poor, which puts all the responsibility on the individual and ignores systemic issues entirely.
You're absolutely right to flag that. The structural problems are real. Redlining was real. Wage stagnation is real. Healthcare costs in this country are catastrophic for low-income families. The wealth gap is mathematically documented and getting wider. None of that is in someone's head.
So where's the line?
The line is between explanation and prescription. The structural problems explain how people end up in the trap, but once you're in it, the only tools you have are your own. You cannot wait for the system to fix itself and do nothing in the meantime. The narrative of victimhood, when it becomes total, when it becomes the only story, is dangerous not because it's false, but because it's paralyzing. You can hold both truths at once. The system failed you, and you still have to find a way out.
And the 5 loops you're describing are actually the mechanism of the trap, not a judgment of the trapped.
Exactly. I'm not saying people are poor because of character flaws. I'm saying these are the specific, identifiable mechanisms that keep people trapped regardless of their character. Understanding the mechanism is the first step to finding the exit.
Okay, loop 5. You called it the compound void?
The compound void. And this is where Einstein comes in. Supposedly, he called compound interest the 8th wonder of the world. Whether or not he actually said it, the math is real. Compound interest means your money grows on its previous growth. Every year, you earn interest not just on your original amount, but on all the interest you've already accumulated. Over time, the growth becomes exponential. It looks flat for a long time, and then it shoots up like a hockey stick.
And the tragedy is that most people in poverty are experiencing compound interest from the wrong side.
They're paying it, not earning it. You have a credit card at 20% annual interest. You have a car loan, maybe student loans. Every single day you wake up and you are poorer than you were the night before, even if you didn't spend a single dollar. The interest compounds against you while you sleep. You're paddling a boat upstream and the current is getting stronger every day.
While wealthy people are experiencing the opposite, they wake up richer than they were even if they didn't work.
Passive income, investment returns, rental income, their money is working while they sleep. And the gap between those two realities grows exponentially, not linearly, exponentially, which is why the wealth gap looks so extreme and feels so hopeless. It's not that rich people work so much harder. It's that their money has been accumulating compound returns for longer.
So the escape is moving from the paying side to the earning side of compound interest.
And I break that transition into 3 stages. Stage 1, survival. This is where you stop the bleeding. You cut expenses to the bone, monk mode, and you use every bit of saved money to eliminate high-interest debt first. The credit card at 20% goes before anything else. You are killing the vampire that is draining your blood while you sleep.
Debt avalanche.
Mathematically, yes, you prioritize by interest rate, not by balance size. Highest rate first. Some people prefer the debt snowball, smallest balance first, because of the psychological win. Both work, but if we're being purely mathematical, you attack the highest interest rate debt with everything you have.
Stage 2?
Accumulation. This is where you start buying assets. And I want to be careful here because asset can sound like fancy real estate or day trading, and that's not what I mean. I mean boring, accessible, reliable assets. Index funds. A low-cost S&P 500 index fund. You don't need to understand individual stocks. You don't need to pick winners. You are buying a tiny piece of the entire American economy and letting it grow over decades.
And the entry point is lower than most people think.
You can start with $10 a day. $10. That's less than most people spend on coffee and lunch. Put it in an index fund every day. Don't touch it. Don't watch it. Don't react when the market drops, and it will drop repeatedly. Just keep buying. Over 20 years, the compound returns turn that $10 a day into something that would seem like a fantasy to someone who started.
That's roughly $3,000 a year. Over 20 years at average market returns?
You're looking at somewhere north of $200,000 from $10 a day. That's the eighth wonder. And it looks pathetic for the first 5 years. That's why most people quit. They look at the account balance and think this isn't working. But the back half of compound growth is where everything happens. The graph starts flat, then curves upward sharply. You have to survive long enough to reach the curve.
And stage 3?
Freedom. This is the escape velocity moment. Stage 3 is when your assets generate enough passive income to cover your basic living expenses. That's the line. The moment your money earns more per month than you need to survive, you have broken the gravitational pull. You no longer have to sell your time to stay alive. You have options. You have dignity. You can take risks you couldn't afford before. You can walk away from bad situations, jobs, relationships, living arrangements that you were trapped in because you had no financial cushion.
And the work to get there, the monk mode, the skill stack, the social gravity management, all of that is the fuel for the rocket.
You're building enough force to reach escape velocity. And the beautiful thing is that once you break orbit, the friction disappears. The things that used to be catastrophes become inconveniences. The things that used to be emergencies become opportunities. Your brain, no longer in crisis mode, starts to function at full capacity. You start to see possibilities that were literally invisible to you before.
I want to go back to something for a second, because I think there's a question underneath all of this that my workshop participants would ask if they felt safe enough.
What's that?
Is this actually possible for me? Or is this the kind of advice that only works for people who were almost already there?
That's the most honest question, and I want to answer it honestly. Is it harder for some people than others? Absolutely. If you're a single mother working 2 jobs, the monk mode period looks different than it does for a single 25-year-old with no dependents. If you're dealing with a disability or a criminal record that limits your job options, or generational trauma that makes it hard to trust any system, including financial ones, the path is steeper.
So what do you say to those people?
I say the laws of physics don't change, but the specific rocket design has to account for the conditions. You might need a longer runway. You might need to find other people to help share the fuel costs, cooperative saving circles, community support networks. You might not be able to cut all the way to monk mode if you have kids depending on you. You adjust the approach without abandoning the destination. And I say, find someone who did it from a similar starting point and study their path specifically. Don't model yourself after someone who started with advantages you don't have.
Mentorship.
The most powerful and underutilized resource. Not the kind of mentorship where you ask someone to coffee and they give you generic advice. The kind where you study their actual decisions, their actual sequence, their actual mistakes.
One thing I keep thinking about as you talk is the 5 loops are also reinforcing each other in the negative direction. Scarcity tax depletes bandwidth, which feeds the dopamine trap, which drains money, which keeps you in linear income, which is surrounded by social gravity, which keeps you on the wrong side of compound interest.
And they feed back into the scarcity tax, which is why it feels like a closed system, because it is a closed system. The exit isn't obvious from inside it. That's why understanding the mechanism matters so much. When you can name the trap, you start to separate yourself from it. You stop experiencing the poverty loop as just life. You start seeing it as a system, and systems can be reverse engineered.
You know what strikes me about everything you've said? At no point have you said, just work harder.
Because in the physics of poverty, linear effort produces zero results. Working a little harder doesn't overcome the gravitational pull. You need exponential change, multiple loops addressed in sequence, compounding on each other in the positive direction. The buffer reduces stress, which clears bandwidth, which helps you resist the dopamine trap, which frees up money, which funds the skill stack, which increases your value, which brings new relationships, which accelerates the compound engine. When it's working in your favor, it feeds itself just as powerfully as it did against you.
Positive feedback loop instead of vicious cycle.
Same mechanism, different direction. And once you understand that, the goal isn't to grit your way through poverty. It's to identify which link in the chain is weakest and attack that first.
Which is why the buffer, the cognitive bandwidth purchase, has to come first.
Because without it, you don't have the mental resources to do anything else on the list. The brain in scarcity mode can't execute a skill stacking strategy. It can't maintain the discipline of monk mode for 6 months. It can't make rational long-term investment decisions. You have to restore the processor first.
I'm going to completely rebuild my workshop curriculum around this conversation.
Tell me more about who's in the room when you do these workshops.
Mixed group, young adults mostly. Some people in their 30s and 40s who've been through something. Job loss, divorce, medical debt. Some people who just grew up without any financial education at all, and they're in their 20s trying to figure out basic stuff.
The ones who grew up without financial education, that's its own layer. Financial literacy isn't just math, it's a language, a culture, a set of assumptions about how money works that gets passed down in households. If your parents didn't talk about investing, didn't have savings accounts, spent money when they had it because having it felt temporary, those aren't just bad habits. Those are survival adaptations from one generation that become liabilities in the next.
Intergenerational transmission of the poverty loop.
And it's one of the hardest loops to break because it's invisible. You don't know it's a loop, it's just how your family does things. It feels like reality. And then someone sits you down and starts talking about Roth IRAs and index funds, and it doesn't just feel complicated, it feels like they're describing a world that exists for other kinds of people.
So part of the work is making people feel like the destination belongs to them.
Identity work. That's the deepest layer. The belief, I am not someone who has investments, or I am not someone who saves money, those beliefs shape behavior more powerfully than any information. You can teach someone everything about how index funds work, and if they fundamentally believe they're not the kind of person who does that, they won't do it.
How do you shift that?
Incrementally. You don't argue people out of their identity, you give them tiny experiences that are inconsistent with the old story. Opening a savings account with $20 and watching it sit there for a month, that's an experience of being someone who saves. Buying one share of a boring index fund, that's an experience of being someone who invests. The identity follows the behavior, not the other way around.
Start with action, not belief.
Because belief that doesn't have experience behind it is fragile. It collapses at the first difficulty. But belief that's been earned through repeated small experiences, that's durable. That can withstand the car breaking down.
We keep coming back to that car.
Because it's real. I've been that person. Sitting at the mechanic being told it's going to be $800 and I have $42 in my account, and I can feel the floor dropping out from under me. And the way that feels, it's not just logistical stress. It's identity collapse. It confirms everything the poverty loop has been whispering to you about who you are and what you're capable of.
But the buffer changes that moment entirely.
When you have the $1,000 sitting there and the mechanic says $800, it's just Tuesday. And the first time you experience that, the first time something that would have destroyed you a year ago just gets handled, that is the moment something changes permanently. You have proof that the new system works, proof that you are the new version of yourself.
That's escape velocity.
That's the launch.
And after the launch, the silence comes.
What do you mean?
When a rocket clears the atmosphere, all the noise and turbulence disappears. Space is silent. There's no friction. The chaos of the launch is behind you, and suddenly you're just moving freely. That's what financial stability actually feels like after years of the poverty loop. Quiet, clean, options. You can think about things other than survival. You can start to ask what you actually want, not just what you need to get through the week.
That sounds almost hard to imagine if you've never experienced it.
For a long time, I literally couldn't imagine it. I couldn't picture a version of my life where money wasn't a constant low-grade emergency, and that inability to imagine it was part of what kept me stuck. You can't move toward a destination you can't visualize.
So one of the tools is learning to visualize the destination in concrete, specific terms.
Not abstract financial freedom, something specific. What does Tuesday look like when the poverty loop is behind you? Where do you live? What do you do in the morning? What does it feel like to check your bank account? Make it real in your imagination before it exists in reality. That's not magical thinking. That's how the brain works. You move toward what you can clearly picture.
Marcus, this has genuinely changed how I think about my work. I came in with a financial literacy framework, and you've essentially shown me I was treating the symptom while ignoring the disease.
The disease being the 5 loops running simultaneously.
And the real intervention being give people the cognitive bandwidth first, buy back their brain. Then, and only then, does the financial information actually land.
Think of it like trying to teach someone to swim while they're actively drowning. You have to get them out of the water first. The swimming lessons come second.
I want to ask one last thing. You clearly got out. What was the thing that broke it open for you?
Honestly, a book. I was 23, working a job I hated, spending money to make myself feel better about the job I hated, going nowhere, and someone left a dog-eared copy of something in the break room, and I picked it up on my lunch break and just started reading. I don't even remember the specific book, but it was the first time I heard someone describe the trap from the outside, name the loops, explain the mechanism, and something just cracked. I was like, this is a system. This is not fate. Systems can be changed.
And from that point,
3 more years of really hard work. The monk mode was brutal. I missed things I wanted to attend. I said no to things that hurt to say no to. I lost a friendship or 2 over it, but the buffer came first. Then the debt went down. Then I started learning a second skill on evenings and weekends. And at a certain point, I remember the exact month. I looked at my bank account, and for the first time in my adult life, there was more in there than I owed. And that felt like orbit.
The door was always open.
The door was always open. The system wants you to think it's locked. Your circumstances want you to believe it's locked. Sometimes even the people who love you will swear it's locked because seeing you walk through it will challenge everything they believe about their own situation. But the physics doesn't care about any of that. Build enough force, reach the right velocity, and you leave the atmosphere.
And then you can help someone else find the door.
That's the whole point. That's why I'm sitting here talking to you instead of just quietly living my life, because I spent years believing the door was locked. And if I can cut even a few years off that for someone else, if your workshop can do that for 20 people, then that compounds too. Escape isn't just for individuals, it's contagious. And I want to come back to what you said earlier, feeding the dopamine monster, but starving your future. That's the whole trap in one sentence. That's what I want people to walk out of your workshop understanding, not a budget spreadsheet. That one idea.
Compound interest of a different kind.
The best kind, the kind that actually changes the world.
Thank you, Marcus. I mean it.
Go rebuild that workshop and let me know what happens.
I will. I definitely will.